So we are in COP15, and today is December 15th. The negotiations, in my opinion, looks rather disappointing. For example, last night, we stayed here in Bela Center until midnight, listening to the numbers group. The group which are supposed to give us the numbers the Annex 1 countries proposed to commit in the second commitment period in Kyoto Protocol. But until midnight, not a single number was put on the table. I would say we are in this deadlock largely because US is leading the race to the bottom. The US more or less wants to be treated as a developing country without international binding target or with very, very low targets. While more or less understandably, Japan, EU, and Canada don't want to push up their effort without US coming on board. The general talking among the EU governments and among many northern NGOs is that we are in this deadlock because US and China. And here, actually, I want to set the record straight. I think it's not the issue of US and China. It's a US, and I think we should stop the greenwashing. First, let me present you with some numbers. So the Chinese has announced their deviation from business as usual, means 40 to 45% cut in terms of carbon intensity between year 2005 and 2020. And in the US, the proposed cut between 2005 and 2020 is 17% according to the Waxman deal. And we can do some calculations how to compare these two targets. So in the last decade, the US GDP growth was 1.9%. So let's say between 2005 and 2020, the US GDP grows at a similar but slightly higher rate, 2%. And then we can calculate the compounded GDP growth between 2005 and 2020 is about 35%. And with the 17% cut as promised by the Waxman bill, you can do the calculation. That means the US carbon intensity cut would only be 38%, below the 40 to 45 target announced by the Chinese. And not to mention that the Chinese target is a hard target without any offsetting, while the US target is a soft target with offsettings like CDM, LULUCF, and many other loopholes the US negotiators are trying very hard to push through. And even with the 20% target, some of the US NGOs saying they are campaigning for, the US carbon intensity cut would only be slightly above 40%, 40.6% at the lower end of the Chinese target. So what we are talking about, let's forget about historical responsibility. Let's forget about climate debt. Even let's forget about common but differentiated responsibility, which all these things we shouldn't forget. But right now, even if we forget all of this, the US target is still inferior to the Chinese target. So as somebody who has worked hard in the last several years to promote no carbon development in China, now I have absolutely no position to campaign Chinese government further to say they can do better or they should do better, because what is US offering and what is EU offering? Because I feel many EU governments and international NGOs are still being dishonest, saying that China and US are the problem. Is that really the case?